Hi guys, it's Marshall here with this week's live Q&A. So, as I mentioned last week, you guys like polls, so we got another poll. This week I brought up 2 questions and then we had a couple other things brought up in the comments. So I'm going to start with the first one I brought up, which is what should I focus on beyond the labels and of narcissist or codependent? Now, the reason these labels exist is to help us understand a container of behavior. And no situation's going to fit all of it. You know, there's definitely a black and white element to it. There's the narcissist and the codependent. And that helps us understand the general experience of the dynamic that's happening. But a lot of times we have mixed situations where we find ourselves being a little more codependent. We find other people being more narcissistic, or ourselves being narcissistic and they're being codependent. Sometimes we find ourselves swapping roles in the relationship. When somebody, suddenly becomes more healthy or confident, we switch into the codependency to pull them in, or narcissism or whatever. We got to remember that narcissists, genuine narcissists, actually, when you look at the definition, the qualifiers for that don't necessarily contain unhealthy behavior. They contain attributes that are consistent among them, and that's grandiosity, that's a lack of empathy, that's chronic victimhood. They cannot see how they're the perpetrator or the creator of the drama in their life. And that they love to gaslight and they love to make you feel crazy. Now, that's what you got to understand. Those are the qualities you want to be looking at, going, if I'm, and we all have a touch of narcissism. We all do. And we all have a touch of codependency. That's kind of reality. But what we're really going at here is to look at how healthy or unhealthy our behaviors are. That's what matters. So if we're in a relationship where things are not functioning well, where we're scared or they're scared, or we're not able to hear each other, or there's a lot of shaming involved on both parties or one party on the other, we feel crazy in it, we're dealing with a toxic situation. And either one of 2 things are going to happen. One of 3 things. You're going to either tolerate and live with it, you're going to confront it, and it's going to change because the other person's responsive to that, which indicates they're not a narcissist, just indicates they've got unhealthy habits. Number 3, it's going to get worse and you're going to leave. Okay, so when you're looking at your dynamic, you want to look at what is a healthy behavior, what isn't a healthy behavior. And these are actually pretty simple. They're not that complex when we understand what boundaries look like. Now, boundaries function on a premise of consent. What is mine? What is yours? My feelings, your feelings. My actions, your actions. My decisions, your decisions. My desires, your desires. These are fundamental separations that help us understand what's in our yard and what's in their yard. And that's how we start to build boundaries. I apply that. It's actually pretty applicable. It's not just theory. I'm a big fan of practicality. So practicality is to ask a question. If you're in a dynamic with someone, you ask them, well, who made the choice? Oh, now they're, responsible for that consequence. Or who had the feeling? Well, then they're responsible for the feeling. So if I'm in a situation where there's a conflict and I'm really upset and scared, I need to respond to those emotions appropriately. I need to be attentive to them because they're mine to manage. They're not the other person's. We can do that pretty practically with a lot of practicality through nonviolent communication, where we can sit there and say, I feel really scared in the situation when you behave this way, and I really want to feel safe with you. So can we talk about a change in how this is managed and how your behavior responses to me, so I can feel safer in our interactions together? Because I want to feel safe with you. That's my big goal. So that can help. That's a good example about how we can manage that kind of connection and work that out. But fundamentally, when we talk about focusing beyond labels, codependent or narcissist, we're actually looking at healthy and unhealthy behavior. We're looking at things that work for us or don't work for us. And this really requires us to learn about ourselves. Does this feel safe? Does this feel loving? Does this feel like they're trying to control me, or am I trying to control them? What is my objective in this? What might their objective be? That kind of thing. So we need to wise up to that and be really conscious on that, because we're really all about healthy and unhealthy behaviors and control. It's always a control power dynamic in relationship. And so that's what I want you to think about. Is this a healthy behavior? Does it feel safe? Does it feel loving? And if you don't know, absolutely ask, because a lot of times we don't know. And if you get the 8 Habits guide, it gives you an idea of what healthy behaviors look like, so you can work that through. And we'll post that in the comments. Hi, Chris. And hi, Brienne. So is it all really narc and codependent? Nope. It is more, I tend to look at it as codependent behaviors and narcissistic behaviors. The reason why some of the posting and some of the articles and things that we see in the group are narcissist and codependent is because it's an easier way to communicate the big message in it. But when we get into the finesse, the nuance of it, it's fundamentally about our behaviors and what they're doing, what we're trying to accomplish in those behaviors. And so that's an important problem we need to address and understand what that means for us. So let's see, people are messaging me everywhere. So, and then Missy asks a question about, how about my life was all about the narc, now what? Well, I'll give you a secret about codependency if you really want to get deep on it. Codependency is a way of looking at the world one way. It's a way in which we relate to the world a specific way. Now, the healthy world works the opposite of codependency. So, in response to your question, Missy, if it's all about the narc, then for you to become healthy, it needs to become more about you first. And this is key. First, not only. Okay, so there's a spectrum, and I'll post the picture up here, the graphic. Me only is the narcissistic behavior. Me only. This is the only way it's going to be. It's going to be me, me, me. Healthy relating, us. Me too, you too, we. Codependent, only you. Where we want to go is that middle ground where we come first. And what that means is that we're accessing our own emotions. We're present with our own thoughts, feelings, points of view that matter in this. And then we can connect to it. We can understand it. We can appreciate it and see what we like about it, what we don't like about it, and if we want it or if we don't. See, when we're choosing ourselves first, it's about what we want to give, what we want to receive, what we want to tolerate, what we want to invest. And that's where our happiness lies. It doesn't lie in the other person and never will. We're not designed that way. We survive that way because the narcissist tried to make it all about them, and to get a table scrap of love from them, we pleased them, and then they gave us a little table scrap. And this happened reliably enough in our lives where we became convinced that this is how love works. This is how happiness works. Happiness is a product. It's a byproduct. It's a result of choosing ourselves first, choosing what works for us first. So we need to learn how to listen to what we want, what we need, what we don't want, what we don't need, and then begin honoring and living from that. And that is found in our bodies. It's somatic, meaning it's felt. It's a felt sense experience. It's not up here in our analysis. If you enroll in Heal, you'll notice that most of my processes are all built based on the body, because analysis, and this is one reason why therapy tends to grind to a halt for a lot of people, is because it's based on analysis. We want to understand why. And there's a theory that says, if I can understand why, then I'll heal. But never once has that worked. If it did, you probably wouldn't be here, because most of you, or if not all of you, are expert analyzers, right? So there has to be more in the processing of learning how to let go of the shame that binds you, integrate the love that completes you, and then to come to know who you are from that love. And that's what I teach in my program, Heal. And that's the foundation of healing genuine codependency, because it is not an identity. It is absolutely not a disease. It is a coping mechanism that helped us survive love starvation or love neglect. So there it is. Okay, so Chris asks a question, what is the difference between codependent and having a spiritual gift of service to others? Well, being codependent is putting yourself last in a way that you'll never show up. Think of it like a grocery line. So you're in a line, you're at the back of the line, so there's 3 people ahead of you, right? And then somebody gets behind you. Well, the codependent would say, okay, I'm going to get behind that person. So now you have 4 people ahead of you. And then another shows up behind you. But they need the space too. They should go first. Now I'll get behind them. Now you have 5. You always come last, which means you never come at all. You're never chosen. Now, gifts of service, acts of service, that's a love language as well. That needs to come from a place that you want to give without an expectation of return. And I call this give to get. And it's a very dangerous game. If I'm doing something for someone and they don't reciprocate and I'm angry about that, then I gave it with strings attached. Because if we're going to give with genuine love, then we're giving it of freedom of ourselves. So if you feel inspired, Chris, to give, and you give and you're happy with the giving, that brings you joy, and it doesn't matter what they do on the other end, then you're free. But if you have some sort of expectation that they are to do something in return to you, then that is where you're getting into give to get, which is not necessarily a codependent behavior, but it is a very common behavior, strings attached behavior for giving things. And so I want you to be mindful of that. But codependency is always about putting ourselves last. It's also about not checking in with ourselves. Because a lot of times people who are empathic tend to think they must give empathy, when in reality, they're not checking in. They're absorbing other people's energy, their emotions, rather than saying what is mine, what is theirs, and leaving that where it belongs, okay? Which is the yard in which it came from. Well, codependent, oh, hi, Rose. Will codependent people really know how to love and validate our own selves? Yeah, well, yeah, because if you stop being codependent, you will come to know and love yourself. See, codependency is not an identity. It's not who you are. It is how you survived neglect, chronic love neglect specifically. And so coming to love ourselves is part of what Heal teaches. It gets in there and it helps you understand what it's like to love ourselves through the guided, through what's called the daily integrated meditations. They're designed to give you an experience of being loved and allowing that to show up. You're welcome, Chris. And so, and validating our own self is actually pretty simple. It's literally doing the validation. I approve of my feeling. I approve of my choice. And trusting in it, giving ourselves a chance to trust it. And it's all about choice. See, codependency, and one of its biggest factors is reactivity. It's doing something for someone else or waiting for someone to do something that then we react to. And I call that reactivity, or waiting for permission. What if, Rose, you gave yourself permission to feel whatever you feel and let it be valid? What if you gave yourself permission to have total authority over your own life? That's what we actually focus on in week 1 of Heal, which is, being is what it's called, and or being you fearlessly. And it teaches you how to occupy your own personal autonomy, occupy your own space, and start to explore who you are from that place, rather than living in the reactivity that we are conditioned in by the neglect and abuse we've endured. So as a recovered codependent, I can absolutely say that we can come to know and validate ourselves naturally. Absolutely. And I have hundreds of clients that can testify to that as well. So it is something that we grow out of. If you really take codependency as a coping mechanism and say, wow, I know how to survive a narcissistic or neglectful abuse environment. Now I'm going to discover who I am in a healthy, connected, reciprocal, validating environment. Then you'll start to see that, oh, I have choice here. I can be codependent over here if I need to, and I can be myself over here if I had to. And that helps us get through that. I use that model to help people understand that they can grow that way, that they can liberate themselves that way by understanding that they aren't codependent. They just know themselves as a codependent, but there's so much more to who we are than that. And Heal helps you accomplish that through the 3rd step of the 3 steps that comprise Heal, which is coming to know you. And we do that through a specialized process called embodiments. Okay, so hi, Valerie. So that answers the questions for today. Well, you actually mentioned, you had a comment on there, Valerie. I often wonder if I was the narcissist in my marriage, but then I realized I was the one always trying to smooth things over and make them look good. Yep, bingo. That is what a codependent would do. Don't rock the boat, guys. We got to be the peacemakers. We got to keep it, solid. No, healthy people rock the boat because they're advocating for their happiness, their well-being, their health, their safety. They're going to say no, and they're not going to feel guilty about it. Did you know that you have a right not to care? I have 2 rights I teach in Heal and Thrive. And the first right is that you have the right to occupy space, whatever space that might be that you want to occupy. And 2, you have the right not to care. That doesn't mean you don't have to care. That means you have a right to choose it. Because I can guarantee you, most of us don't always care. Something happens and we don't always care. And I guarantee you've already done it at least once in your life where you didn't care about something. It is okay not to care. But what's more important is to tune into what your body is giving you and then understand what you genuinely feel about a situation that's going on, so you know how to approach it. Like in my post about empathy and dealing with my parents and their situation, I tuned into me. I checked in with me to understand what I needed, what was going on for me there. I didn't react codependently, which would have, I guarantee you this, if I'd been codependent in this situation, I wouldn't be sitting here. I would be in their town, in their home, taking care of them, despite what they've done to me and despite how terrified my body is of that thought. That's codependency, because I would never check in with me. But living as a healthy, self-advocating individual, we check in with ourselves. And then we say yes or no based on what works for us. Because fundamentally, other people are grown-ass adults. They can take care of themselves. And if they can't, then we can connect them to resources that could, but we are not responsible for their well-being. They are. And one of the things narcissists love to do is feign learned helplessness or powerlessness. They can't do it without you, but then they can do everything. You just never can do it right. My parents have that kind of backwards, that contradiction, that paradox, or that doesn't make any sense, does it? So when we stop caretaking others and fixing things for others and rescuing, we become free. And then we can choose how to contribute. And we can choose who we contribute to. So we can always feel empathy, but we don't always have to act from it. We need to check in with ourselves and understand what works for us. So thank you guys for being a part of the group. I appreciate you being here. Continue to ask questions, continue to post, continue to enjoy the group. I hope it's going well. My goal here is to create community, connection, and to help you guys understand that you're really worth knowing, you're really worth loving, and you really are worth keeping. And you can accomplish that. And I've got my tools, my processes and courses for that, and there's a lot of other ones out there. I encourage you to choose the things that resonate with you, okay? So you guys have a great night. We'll talk next week. Be sure to post your questions, and then we can get them addressed. You guys have a good night, okay? I'm going to go find the button that's underneath all the notices. Okay, good night, guys. Bye-bye.